This is Regenerative Skills, the podcast helping you to learn the skills and solutions to create an abundant and connected future. I'm your host, Oliver Gaucher. So at this point, I think we all know that YouTube videos, social media posts, and blog snippets will only get you so far. If you really want to develop the knowledge and skills you need to live regeneratively, you need the thorough information in a full book. Through their diverse range of publications, New Society Publishers' books explore topics that are at the forefront of creating positive change in our world. From regenerative agriculture and permaculture to social justice and eco-conscious living, their books cover a wide spectrum of subjects that empower readers to lead more regenerative and fulfilling lives. So whether you're a seasoned environmentalist, a curious beginner, or someone simply seeking inspiration and guidance on your journey towards regenerative living, New Society Publishers is here to support you every step of the way. If you subscribe right now to their newsletter at newsociety.com, you'll be the first to receive sneak peeks at new content and get discounts on upcoming title releases. You'll even get an exclusive discount code on their first purchase of books, ebooks, or audiobooks. So sign up today at newsociety.com. Hey there everybody and welcome back. So today I've got a really fun episode for you. This comes from back in the early days of the pandemic when I found myself with an unusual amount of time on my hands all of a sudden. And I used some of that time to create short, highly produced episodes which whittled the normal hour-long interviews into distilled 30-minute highlights from the conversations. Unfortunately, I ended up scrapping this format since it took about 5 or 6 hours of editing and I quickly got busy with other work, but I still love how these episodes came out and how they got straight to the point of the most relevant information in each interview and the actionable steps that listeners could put into practice in their own lives. In today's episode, I spoke with Van Clothier about the innovative and subtle water erosion mitigation technique called a one-rock dam. I know this might seem oddly specific, but after an interview with Brad Lancaster last season, he talked about how he's been learning from people like Van and his mentor Bill Zeedyk about smaller, less intrusive interventions that can have profound effects on the health of a watershed. The truth is that there are so few watersheds and water bodies left around the world that aren't highly degraded and in need of restoration. Many of the communities most affected by this damage don't have the resources to hire engineers and professionals to do surveys and undertake large, expensive restoration projects. A lot of what Van promotes, however, flies in the face of these large professional technical projects and teaches people how to understand their watersheds and identify the small and gradual work that can be done to improve their health. The One Rock Dam is a great example of this, and so today we'll be exploring what it is, how it can be installed, and most importantly, how to educate yourself on how to interact and intervene in a damaged waterway in an effective way that doesn't cause further damage in the long run, like many of the big professional projects do. So a little background information. Van Clothier's firm, Stream Dynamics Incorporated, specializes in turning runoff and erosion problems into water harvesting opportunities with water harvesting earthworks, urban stormwater retrofits, and riparian and wetland restoration in both urban and wildland settings. Van has worked extensively in New Mexico and Arizona on a variety of restoration projects with regional dryland stream restoration and water harvesting experts including Bill Zeedyk and Brad Lancaster. He's the co-author with Bill Zeedyk of the book Let the Water Do the Work: Induced Meandering, an Evolving Method for Restoring Incised Channels. Recent projects include design water harvesting stormwater retrofits for the city of Santa Fe and restoring a very large cienega, or desert marsh, in the Botheel of New Mexico. But those are just the stats. I'll let Van tell you a bit about himself and some of the projects that he's most proud of.
I live in a small mountain town in the American Southwest, and I received funding from a state agency to build 80 water harvesting curb cut projects in my town. And I built all of them and had many different interactions with my neighbors. I have a whole bunch of projects that are still there. There's this one guy where we cut the curb and we put the water into a basin on a city right-of-way, grassy area, in front of his house, right? And then what that guy did is he cut a hole in his wall and made an overflow into his front yard, which was this huge low-lying area. And I went back during a rainstorm, and then that guy was getting like a huge amount of water off the street, right? And him and his neighbors, like there's about 4 projects in a row on this one street. And it was flowing like hell. It was running down the gutter as fast as you could run. And I made a video by driving my truck with my smartphone sticking out the window. And I went, and I looked at the first inlet, and that guy's basin was full. And I kept on going, and I zoomed into the next neighbor's pond, and by the time I get to this guy's house, he's put some bricks also out, extending out into the street, and he's directed all of the remaining flow, and it's going into his yard, and then it's weeping out through this rock wall, and it's turning the city median grass into this giant sponge, and that's it. The street is dry after that. Okay. And all of that flow that had been going all the way down the street and into our stream, carrying polluted, sediment-laden runoff water, creating erosion. Instead, at least from that street, it soaked extremely deeply into my neighbors, my friends' yards and gardens and orchards. And they got like, I don't know, $1,000 worth of water, right? Totally killer. I'm trying to start something in my own town.
One of the popular methods for stopping the erosion of a damaged stream or a runoff channel is to come in and install what are called gabion baskets or gabion baskets. These are big 3 foot by 3 foot square metal cages that get filled with rocks and stacked on one another in the bottom of a waterway, forming a wall that lets some water through but forces it to deposit its sediment on the upstream side, eventually building sediment up to the height of the wall, which is a pretty good idea, right? But Van explained to me why this is often not a good long-term solution.
About gabion baskets versus one rock dams and all of that. Here's the thing, right? What you need to do is to stop the gully from cutting deeper. Don't try to fill the gully in first. You're not working with the forces. What's happening is you need to just stop the gully from cutting deeper and direct that energy at the gully walls so it will cut wider instead. Okay? And then that will produce sediment that will help fill up the gully. Okay? If you build a gabion basket, which creates, you think, oh, I'm going to trap a lot of sediment with this here gabion basket, going to be 4 feet tall. Okay? What happens is it does trap a lot of sediment. It fills in with 4 feet of sediment. And then there's a 4-foot waterfall, which creates this huge power source that erodes the gabion basket and starts the gully again. A 2-foot drop is like, you don't want to do more than like for beginners, raise the bottom of the gully maybe 6 inches, right? Get the biggest rocks you can move and put them in a line across the gully. You dig a trench and you put your bottom row of rocks in that trench. And then you put smaller rocks on the upstream side all the way across, and you make a rock mattress locked in as good as you can, not high. Okay? And then here's the trick. And then you do another one downstream, and you do another one downstream of that, and you build a whole bunch of these things just to keep the gully from going down. And now automatically its energy is going to be directed to the sides. And the gully will fill itself up and bury all of your work and look like you were never there and be fixed. But if you build the gabion baskets, you'll have this dramatic result, and then it has a built-in self-destruct mechanism.
That makes sense. But I'm still curious about working in a gully or a stream that experiences such force when it floods and can easily blow out almost any installation. I was wondering if there was a way to start even smaller and gain some experience with an intervention with lower risk of failure.
If you want to learn, here's what you do. You start at the top of a watershed where things are very, very small. You go to a not very big gully that doesn't have powerful floods that will move a bowling ball sized rock. And you can tell it's a gully because it's V-shaped and it's cutting deeper and it looks bad, right? And when I was teaching myself, I had rocks. I had rocks the size of lemons. And I put them in a teeny, teeny, tiny little rill where I saw a waterhead flowed. And then when it was raining hard, I'd go out and I'd watch and I'd see what happened to that. And then I worked up to slightly larger systems. And so what you do is you go in and you make a row of rocks that goes across the gully, but it's only one rock high. It's only like if you used 1 foot rocks, you'd bury them most of the way. So this doesn't even stick up.
Okay, so I'm getting a real sense of how this works, but I can foresee one potential problem. What if you're in an area that doesn't have any stones? I mean, I can't imagine that your first idea should be to bring them in from elsewhere.
If there are no stones available, then probably stones are inappropriate, because if your water course doesn't have stones, it has another way to dissipate energy. And you need to find out how your water course has been dissipating energy and dissipate it that way. If you're importing stones to an arroyo that doesn't have them, you might be automatically doing the wrong thing.
When I spoke to Bill Zeedyk about this, he talked about an alternative where he used large diameter wooden stakes, similarly buried deep with just a few inches sticking out above the ground and arranged in an alternating pattern, almost like a pegboard on the gully floor.
Right. So imagine you have a silt bed stream. A lot of arid places in China have, it's called loess, like LOESS. That's like silt that has zero stick-to-itiveness, and it's totally fucking erodible, right? If you try to stop erosion in a system like that with rocks, the silt will just rinse away from around your rocks, and the rocks will dig themselves holes, and they'll go to China. They'll go deeper into China. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in a system like that, what you need to do is you need to dissipate energy. And the very best way to dissipate energy is to split it and split it and split it further still. And that's what grass does. If you can imagine water trying to flow down a hillside, what if it's going through a field of thick grass? It has to flow around millions of tiny little stems.
Each one taking a little of the kinetic energy and relieving it of any silt that it may have picked up along the way.
And working in concert, in legions, to change the physics of a vast surface.
Yeah,
Okay.
and especially with plant matter too, those stems don't only affect the surface, but they also offer a path for the water to infiltrate deeper in if it's slowed down enough, right? It's giving it a path to enter into the ground as well.
Right. And so in watershed restoration, it's not about building a very strong structure in one place at the bottom of the watershed. In fact, I wouldn't do it. Instead, what you need to do is change the surface performance of your watershed, because that's going to change the outlet better than anything.
Van and I also talked about how these small installations lend themselves to much longer term solutions than those big projects for one key reason. They lend themselves perfectly to being integrated with living infrastructure. That means real regeneration of the ecosystem as a whole. But I'll let Van explain how this works.
The vegetation is more important than the dams. And if I were Gandalf, I would just move my wand and sprout a cottonwood tree there, and its roots would hold the bank better than any rocks. So we're always trying to incorporate our structures into existing trees and vegetation, and that also helps irrigate that. It makes it stronger and its roots grow among the rocks and form a guild. So we're always designing our work to cause more water to soak into the ground in the vicinity of that work, in hopes that the vegetation will take over and fix the problems before the rocks get eroded. And I've got plenty of places where that happened. And then Mondo floods tore out my rocks, but it didn't matter because it had started this vegetation erosion resistant agency in the bottomland that dominated over time, even in a place where many of my structures were compromised. And I went back and I decided I don't even need to fix the rocks. The vegetation has got this one. That's what it's about.
Now this idea is really starting to come together for me. The One Rock Dam is a way to stabilize the floor of the gully so that it doesn't erode deeper, and it transfers the energy of the water to the banks, eventually widening the flow and spreading it out. But the essential thing is that it's not supposed to do the work year after year. By trapping sediment and slowing the water, it's giving the native vegetation the opportunity that it needs to get reestablished and take over the work of repairing the damaged site and holding the earth together while absorbing water into the soil and creating the conditions for more life. But how do you go about selecting what plants to seed the dam with, and how do you plant them?
That's a really good question. What you have to do is go and look and see what's growing there and know about other places in your neighborhood, in your neck of the woods, and know what's possible for that site. And you also need to know the watershed hydrology. Is it normally dry? If so, how deep is the moist zone? What could grow here? What could grow here now that's just not here? I'd definitely seed with a native seed mix. I'd seed with the native seed and wildflower mix from your area, okay? And if you're going to build a one rock dam, put the seeds down before the rocks so that critters won't be able to find them as easy, right? And some of them might survive. And then when there's a stream flow event, the stream flow will bring in leaves and rabbit turds and sand grains and stuff like that and cover up your rocks and seed, and something might sprout. It's a really good idea to do that. And then also, if you do have soil moisture in an arroyo, you can use a digging bar, like a 6 foot long, 1 inch, sorry for the US unit.
2.5 centimeters, gotcha.
A 2.5 centimeter diameter rod, and jam it into the arroyo bottom and waller it around in a circle and then jam it in again and mess with it like that. If you can draw it out and there's a foot of, like it's an oil dipstick, right? Mm-hmm. What if there's a foot of water in the bottom of your hole? Guess what? stick a willow in there and do it 100 more times, right? And then you automatically have a willow that's growing as long as it stays at least moist all the time at that spot. Then you can plant willows with a bar, and we've done thousands of them. They don't all grow, only about like 95% of them grow. Then you can also like get a backhoe and you can cut a branch off of a cottonwood tree and take all of the leaves off of it, every single leaf off of it, and dig a big hole and stick it in upright with the backhoe as long as it's a couple feet into the water, cover it up, and go home. It's going to be a cottonwood tree, okay? It's magic.
For this whole time now, we've been talking about this in the context of a dry or an arid landscape. It's going to take a while to see results in these projects and for the vegetation to get established. But I've got good news for those of you who live in more humid climates.
If you have water and smarts, it's like cheating, okay? Like I've done this work in a high mountain meadow, 8,500 foot high mountain meadow that had just a tiny little stream flow in a 2-foot gully. And it looked very green because it was high mountains and everything's green, but it was grass, it was upland vegetation for that green place, right? And so with a small excavator or even a crew of volunteers and hand shovels, you can transplant sod, block the gully, raise the water table, create a marsh. You come back in the morning, all your ponds are overflowing with clean water, and you fixed it right back how it should be.
Just getting rid of one drainage escape.
Right. Yeah. But you have to know what you're doing, and you have to do it in the right place.
Sure.
Yeah. And so if you have water, if you have permanent moisture even, then it's way easier to fix because then life comes in sooner.
And that's really what this is all about. Fixing watersheds is a foundational step in creating the conditions for more life, diverse, abundant, thriving life. There is so much to know and to learn about the dynamics of watersheds, and I'm hoping that through this podcast I can help to make this knowledge more common around the world. Now, before we wrap this up, just remember that these episodes are only the beginning of the learning resources, design and coaching services, in-person courses, and interactive community that are available through Regenerative Skills. The Discord server is our free community where you can connect with other like-minded listeners, exchange ideas, stories, tips, and resources, as well as interact with me directly and quite a few former guests from this show. Our Instagram account @regen_skills is the best place to see the projects that me and the team are working on, both for clients and collaborators, as well as on our own properties. I'll also be announcing the certification courses, workshops, and gatherings that we've got coming up later this year. If you're interested in getting dedicated support for your own project, you can now schedule a free planning session with one of our team members through the request form on our website. You can also find all the links, show notes, and past resources there at regenerativeskills.com. We truly believe that no matter your experience, your knowledge, abilities, resources, or background, you can be a powerful force for regeneration on this planet, and we're here to help you find your path. So as always, remember to keep taking those little steps every day towards a regenerative future, and I'll be right by your side along the way.